He's with the former ambassador.
She's trying to interject her viewpoint from the value system that she comes out of, which is of no value to the United States of America at all. She looks like a fool every time she opens her mouth. She is a traitor to the United States of America. She is aiding and abetting the Muslim Brotherhood terrorist organizations like CoChair and Islamic Relief USA. She needs to be investigated by the Attorney General, and Nancy Pelosi needs to call for the removal of this woman.
Cardozo-Moore says Omar is a threat to the national security of the United States and our allies. I'm Chad Groening.
The Institute for Justice reports 2 Montana moms are taking their legal battle with the State Department of Revenue to have the tax credit scholarship program restored all the way to the Supreme Court.
The state's Supreme Court nullified the law last December, ruling that it was unconstitutional for religious schools to be included in the program, citing the state's Blaine Amendment. However, Erica Smith of the Institute for Justice argues that the decision violates the U.S. Constitution.
So just like the government can't say you can only go to religious schools, the government can't say you cannot go to religious schools.
It should be noted, most of the private schools in Montana are religious. She says the Institute for Justice has petitioned the U.S. Supreme Court and is waiting to hear whether the court will take up the case.
I think it's really important to remember the types of families that these political disputes are affecting, because it's so easy to get caught up in separation of church and state and, these fancy legal issues, but at bottom, this is really affecting a lot of families in a very serious way.
Smith says the Montana Supreme Court has become the first in the country to invalidate a tax credit scholarship program. I'm Bob Kellogg.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com and on the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
My pride made me believe that my addiction was my business, that I can face it on my own. But at Teen Challenge, I found people I could trust, and with their help, I broke free from my addiction.
If you or a loved one are struggling with addiction, Adults at Teen Challenge can help. There are centers across the country, and you can find the one nearest you at 855-END-ADDICTION or at TeenChallengeUSA.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Georgia is a state that values life. We protect the innocent. We champion the vulnerable. We stand up and speak for those unable to speak for themselves. Through the Life Act, we will allow precious babies to grow up and realize their full God-given potential.
Instead of trying to engage on a level playing field and, actually doing some work, you merely silence the dissent. This is classic authoritarianism. This is the rhetoric of authoritarian tyrants, yet we're the dangerous ones. Really?
I don't know of any president in our lifetime who's carried as many negative burdens from the political class as President Trump has. I think as we get beyond that, as he continues to do a good job, his numbers are going to keep going up. And as people realize, you may or may not like his style, but you sure have to like his results.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Oh, yeah. I do not have enough show for the show today. And that is not me exaggerating. I also don't have enough cool air in here. The weather in Missouri is just killing me. So that's why if you're watching the live stream or if you're listening on terrestrial radio in one of the umpteen number of states that we broadcast to here at American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk, you might hear the sound of me fanning myself with this newspaper. I am trying to avoid buying a fan for in here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it. Anyway, today on the show, we are going to be chatting with Terri and Barbi Franklin of Love Sings, the Artistry of Marriage. They're going to join us to talk about they have this fantastic program. It's for couples. Husbands and wives can do this together. And they've had 34 years of ministering through family worship, prayer events, marriage retreats in the U.S. and 40 countries around the world. And so we are so excited to have them on the show today. We are also going to be talking about this video of these kids at this Philadelphia Islamic Center. And the kids there are actually singing about chopping off the heads of the infidels. You, me, your kids, my kids. They're singing about killing us, y'all. And they're singing about it in the sweetest little children voices. Like if you would hear them, you'd think, oh, what are they saying in Arabic or Farsi or whatever their language is? And if you knew what they were saying, you'd be like, oh my goodness, somebody call the Department of Homeland Security. So of course, they've got somebody investigating the Muslim American Society, which has on numerous occasions been involved in these kinds of stories. So they hardly have the credibility to be able to investigate this. Sorry, not sorry. They shouldn't be the ones checking it out. Anyway, we are also going to be talking about, in just a second here, Tiger Woods getting emotional during his Medal of Freedom ceremony. And I want to tie that to a couple things that we have going on. And then you heard the audio coming into the show. Paul Joseph Watson is one of the people who was suspended from Facebook, not really because of himself, but because he's affiliated with InfoWars. And so we're going to talk about that and listen to a couple of points that he's made. And I got to say, I felt a little bit of condemnation when I was listening to him about, I've talked about it on the show, but what else have I done? So we'll get into that in the third segment. As always, you're welcome to call the show at 866-963-2037. Don't forget to go over to stacyontheright.com and hit the subscribe button. All right, so let's get into our encouragement for today. Jesus answered, this is John 14:6. I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. No one comes to the Father except through me. So no matter how fun Oprah Winfrey might make it sound to say that all religions lead to heaven and lead to God, and no matter how many people might say that this thing or that thing can get you there, the Bible is clear. John 14:6. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And as Christians, we have to be emphatic about that, unapologetic about it, and we have to be willing to put our foot down about it, even if it means unpopularity, losing so-called friends, having people want to ridicule us for being, maybe you carry a Bible with you everywhere that you go. Yeah, I do. It's called a cell phone. I have a Bible app on it. So what? We have to be willing to go at these people, not in anger, but in a sense that we know we're right. If you don't think you're right, if you're unsure about it, then you're not going to be able to adequately defend what it is that you say you believe. So we have to get this into us. It has to be a part of us. It has to be what we breathe, what we live, the way we're walking, the way we're talking, that we know that Jesus Christ is the way. And if that's upsetting for people, you know what God said about Jesus and the sword of truth, that he divides mother from daughter, father from son, husband from wife, because some will believe and some won't. Not your problem to worry about anything beyond telling the truth and doing so in love. So that's the encouragement for today. All right, I want to get through and listen to Tiger Woods. And this is such a redemption story. And I've always thought, oh, Tiger Woods, he's such a great golf player. I've always thought, what an example. And then when he went through his trials and his tribulations, I wondered if he could come back. And I even said, I remember saying to my husband, he's such a success story and it's so sad to see him go this way. And my husband said, yeah, but he could theoretically, he could bounce back. And I said, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that could actually happen. Well, it's been years, over a decade, in fact. And he hasn't just bounced back. He's come back in such a strong and amazing way. And so let's listen to him here. He's receiving the Medal of Freedom from the President of the United States, who he just happens to be very good friends with. And after having the medal draped over his he has a tie and a suit on and everything, so it's draped over his neck. And then he steps up to the podium and he had something to say that I thought was it's encouraging for all of us to hear a man of this stature who fell from so high to so low, then come forward and share this kind of emotional return. It's number 4.
I just want to say this has been an unbelievable experience, and to have the support that I've had for all these years, and everyone here has seen and been with me for, some of you for my entire life, and some of you for more than half my life. You've seen the good and the bad, the highs and the lows, and I would not be in this position without all of your help. In 97, yes, I won the Masters, and I was there I ended up hugging my dad and my mom. My dad's no longer here, but my mom's here. I love you, Mom. Thank you. And Sam and Charlie, for all your love and support. I love you guys so much. Erica, thank you. I mean, everyone has meant, you guys have meant so much to me in my life, and I've battled. I've tried to hang in there, and I've tried to come back and play the great game of golf again. I've been lucky enough to have had the opportunity to do it again, and I found a game that has allowed me to do this. And the amazing Masters experience that I just had a few weeks ago certainly is part of the highlight of what I've accomplished so far in my life. And so,
obviously, I sincerely, as one of the things I've noticed is ever since the Masters win, he hugged the girlfriend, Erica, and then there's been a lot of attention placed on her. She's the girlfriend, they've been together for a while. And they kind of do, a lot of those like top 5 facts about her and things like that. And it's my understanding that they're living together. And so, obviously he's a grown man. He's going to do whatever he wants to do. But I just wish they were putting forward that good example of being married to each other instead of just cohabitating. But all in all, it's a wonderful redemption story for him to have gone through not just physical injury and so many other things that have happened to him, but to really, his fall from grace was the revelation about his extramarital affairs and his addictions and his divorce from his first wife. And so it's one of those things where it's just nice to see something nice. And it's nice to see someone that really, I believe a lot of Americans had counted him out and said, he's done, he's gone, and it's time for new, younger players and new blood, of which there are a lot of really talented new up-and-coming players. But for him to come back in this way, it's encouraging. And it just shows you we can come back. We can come back. So any one of us, no matter what the obstacles or how far and low we might have fallen, we can return. So let's now get to this. And I mean, I'm interested in hearing from you what you think about us having people who've immigrated into this country and they're speaking another language. They're going to schools in which they only speak their language of the homeland, the one that they were either ejected from or they ran away from, or they somehow left that place to come here where we all speak English, at least the most of us. And instead of them learning how to speak English and going to American schools so they can learn how to be Americans and continue the traditions that drew them here, because they didn't move here because it was an Islamic country. Have you noticed that? They don't move to Islamic countries. They do not immigrate to Islamic countries. They want to come to Western nations where Christianity is the foundational basis. So it's just odd to me that they have this is the Islamic Center of Philadelphia. And they have the kids, they're adorned in Palestinian scarves. They're celebrating Ummah Day in April, but the translation by Middle East Media Research Institute, MEMRI, reveal the threatening nature of their lyrics. They're talking about conquering Jerusalem and then beheading people. The children sang about subjecting their enemies to eternal torture, beheading people, retaking the Al-Aqsa Mosque, achieving martyrdom as members of Allah's army. I mean, it's very detailed. For them to be so little, they're singing in perfect pitch and harmony, and they're enunciating each of the words about the killing that they're going to do. Now, the Muslim American Society, which has its own spurious history, said they issued a statement apologizing for the songs, and they said the incident was an unintended mistake. Now, this is like one of those things where, an abuser says, oh, that was a mistake. It's not that they're sorry about it. It's not that they will never let it happen again. They're sorry that you know about it. They're sorry that the police or officials know about it, or Department of Health and Services or Family Services. They're sorry that people know what's happened. They're not sorry that they did it, and they fully intend on doing it again. These kids, here's what one of the girls in the video, she says, And I didn't clip the audio for you because they're singing in Farsi or some other language. And you won't be able to see the subtitles, listening on radio. So there's no point in me clipping that for you. Here's what the one girl is saying in the video. We will defend the land of divine guidance with our bodies, and we will sacrifice our souls without hesitation. We will chop off their heads. We will liberate the sorrowful and exalted Al-Aqsa Mosque. We will lead the army of Allah, fulfilling his promise, and we will subject them to eternal torture. So, the Muslim American Society, in their statement, said, while we celebrate the coming together of different cultures and languages, not all songs were properly vetted. This was an unintended mistake and an oversight in which the center and the students are remorseful. The MAS will conduct an internal investigation to ensure this does not occur again. Now, obviously, what they mean is the next time the kids sing about taking Al-Aqsa Mosque back, the next time the kids make known their intention of growing up and doing the jihad wherever they find the infidels, specifically the Israelis, but anybody else who stands in their way, like us, Israeli-loving Americans, they're going to make sure that the next time they do a song like that, there aren't any cameras running. I mean, come on, y'all. Can we just be real for a second? We know that they're not saying they're never going to sing these songs again. They're saying, back to their statement, this was an unintended mistake and an oversight. Yeah, having cameras running when we're singing about how we're going to destroy the infidels, that's not a smart thing to do. We shouldn't have had those cameras there. If they didn't believe in the stuff that the kids were singing, where are the people jumping up and walking out? Where was the person walking over and cutting the camera off? Where were the people? This was back in April. I mean, this is early May, so it's recent, but where are all of the people protesting outside of their Philly Islamic Center? Why don't you see tons of Muslims coming out and saying, not only do we not agree with the Islamic Center of Philadelphia, but we also feel like the Muslim American Society doesn't have a legitimate basis with which to investigate this instance. We want someone from the outside to come in and talk to us about what this should look like. We want to open this place up and show the curriculum and everything else. We want to give people an opportunity to see that this was an anomaly, that we normally teach the kids about the Constitution and how to be good Americans. I'm sorry, are you hearing those crickets? Because that's what I'm hearing. I don't hear anybody say anything like that, which is why I don't believe this drama. All right, when we get back, we're going to have our first guest. Stay right there.
When an abortion-minded woman walks into a preborn pregnancy center, she encounters love and compassion and gets to meet her baby by ultrasound.
And I was like, I'm going to go to the abortion clinic. And I already had my mind made up.
This mom didn't make it to the abortion clinic. Instead, God led her to a preborn center.
And the lady is giving me my ultrasound. She's like making these weird faces. And then she's like, it's 2. And I'm like, I just start crying. I start texting my friends and like, I can't.
The Ministry of Preborn was able to help this mom save not just 1 life, but 2 through ultrasounds. Preborn centers help save babies' lives and souls. Preborn runs and leads Christian pregnancy centers all over the country. To find out more, go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com, or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Your love can save a life.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. I had lunch with a good friend who pastors a large church. We were talking about pitfalls in ministry, things we should guard against. He said to me, you know, Crawford, I've learned that I have to be very careful about what I say in conversation with some of my members. What I say can be twisted and misused. We all need to be careful about what we say and to whom we say it. Psalm 39, verse 1 says, I will guard my ways that I may not sin with my tongue. I will guard my mouth as with a muzzle while the wicked are in my presence. There's some sage advice in this verse. Sage advice part 1. Live in such a way that your life tells the truth about your words. He says, I will guard my ways. In other words, I want how I live to back up what I say. So if people take something I say and twist it, you can always point to my pattern of life, and the consistency of my walk will tell the truth about what I say. Sage advice part 2. Don't sin by what you say. He says, I will guard my mouth as with a muzzle. Don't say too much. Watch the tone. Watch the intention. Sage advice part 3. Don't say too much around ill-intentioned people. He says, while the wicked are in my presence. Not that we unjustly judge folks, but if you know someone doesn't mean well and they have a track record for gossip, that's like giving the alcoholic the keys to the liquor store. You don't want to go there. Be careful. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. Trust and confidentiality are gifts not to be given hastily. Know to whom you're talking, and please be careful what you say.
More information about the ministry of Crawford Loritz can be found online at livingalegacy.org.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's my pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. We have Terri and Barbi Franklin of Love Sings, the Artistry of Marriage. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Stacy, it's good to be with you.
Hey, great to be here.
Wonderful to talk to you. So let's talk about your ministry, which you've spent the past 34 years talking to couples and ministering, not just in America, across the country, but in 40 countries worldwide. So you're an international ministry that promotes biblical marriage. And you have these sessions where it's 6 sessions where people can come together and use your materials to kind of tune up in more than one way, because you can kind of use that both ways because you guys are in music, tune up their marriages. So tell us a little bit about how this came to be.
Yes, Love Sings, the Artistry of Marriage. It's a 6-week video curriculum that we host, and it kind of draws from parallels, between music and marriage. We've been in music for the past 34 years. It's what we've done as both a ministry and, I guess, vocation, starting out as singer-songwriters. And so we take the things that we've learned from music, and we kind of use that as a template for teaching on marriage. Every marriage, kind of like a good song, it requires the right balance of, melody and harmony and rhythm and that kind of a thing. So we share personal stories and from, the times that
we are together all the time.
We're together
and for
24 hours a
34
day.
years.
I was telling on one of the shows, I was telling somebody that, my dad and mom, when I was a kid, my dad would leave the house at, 6:30 in the morning, and would usually get home around, 6:30, something like that. Then on the weekends, he was an entertainer, so he was gone. And the amount of time that my parents spent together wasn't a lot of time. And I'd say maybe for a lot of couples, maybe that's the case. Our situation's a little different. We've had kind of together all the time. So we've had, I'd say, probably 7 or 8 marriages worth of time together. So we've learned some things, of trying to work things out with each other and supporting each other. And we're hoping that this video series, we're so grateful that AFA has really gotten behind it and produced this. Austin Brooks and the whole American Family Studios team really did a great job putting this together.
We're really great.
We're hoping that churches will use it, like for small groups. Individuals certainly could purchase it, but we hope that folks will use it to make a difference.
Okay, so that is fantastic, and I think anything that we can do to promote marriage and to make it more of a priority and to elevate it to something that people are actually working on is something that we should all be in favor of, especially godly marriage, because that's the only marriage that really lasts.
Yes.
So when we're talking about the curriculum, I noticed in my notes here we have 6 sessions. Session 1, tuning up your marriage, the lyrics of love, the beauty of blending, dynamics of the heart, relaxing to the rhythm, and when our song comes together. So how did you decide? Because I know when you get hit with something and you're like, we're doing this, and you're making something, you're creating something new, you can sometimes have an overwhelming amount of content, but you've kind of honed this down to a laser fine point of 6 sessions. How did you come up with 6 instead of 8, and what is the benefit of it being the length that it is?
Well, actually, because we've been traveling in ministry for 34 years, and we started doing marriage seminars probably 25 years ago, I think it was, and we have really seen across not only America, but in many other nations around the world, that there are certain things that couples always deal with. And it's the same here in America as it is in other nations. And we've done, marriage seminars translated into other languages around the world. But it all comes back. It just seems to come back to the same types of things. And God has given us tools in his word. And as we have learned and also seen the things that couples deal with, we try to put not only a biblical template there, because that's what we do, is we pull from the scriptures for the needs that we have and for needs that we see others have. And what we have done is just applied that, and used musical terms. So, you can imagine harmony is something that we all need in our marriages, unity, and blending is something that's, unique to every couple, because you have strengths and your spouse has strengths. And when is somebody singing on melody and the other one supporting with the harmony part? When is, when do you switch? How do you decide what is a priority in your life, in your marriage? How do you agree to disagree? How do you deal with conflicts? These are all things that couples deal with worldwide.
Stacy, when you get down to it, we're really promoting partnership in marriage, a team spirit of looking for, and that's really what that last session, when our song comes together, that's kind of what it's putting forth, is the idea of finding a team mission for your marriage, something that you can do as a couple. It might be something in your church, but it could be something that just is a blessing to other people.
Called by God, you have a mission.
Coaching a little league baseball team. Even something, this crazy. We know a couple that maybe sounds carnal to somebody, but they know that they're good. Both of them work, and they're good at making money. And what they do is at the end of every month, they sit down and they decide where they're going to give and support ministries.
Actually, that's not carnal at all. That's God calls us to do that.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's nice to do it as a couple if they can agree. I know that's a source of disagreement for a lot of couples, is
but they
how much
do
to give.
They actually, every month it becomes a fun thing for them. They sit down and they decide, who can we bless this month? What can we do to be a blessing to somebody? And I tell you what, ministries all over the world are grateful for folks like that.
They must really feel good doing that. It feels so good to be able to give out of what you have and not worry that you won't have enough. And so I have a question, which is a lot of times. So my husband and I have been to a ton of marriage retreats, and we've done a whole bunch of stuff, and some of it was fun, and some of them were not that fun. I'm just going to be honest with you. And I remember one we went to where the whole weekend was kind of just like scripted for us, and we didn't have any free time. And at the end of it, we were a little tired, but we were really blessed. It was actually great content. But later, when I asked my husband if he would want to do it again the next year, he said, no, I think we need something that's a little bit more of a mix. So, because we never get to be alone, we should have some free time to, catch a meal or just spend some time alone together, as opposed to having every minute controlled. Now, this is something that we have the control over. If I was to get this and do it with my husband, we can just watch it at our own pace, 1 a week or 2 a week or however we'd like.
Absolutely.
But what are the results that people see? Like afterwards, after they've done the 6 weeks, do you hear from people and they tell you that they've had breakthroughs or improvements, anything like that?
Well, one of the things that we have had responses to is that we encourage couples to learn how to pray together, even if it's a short 5 minutes or something every day. Because what we see is in our own marriage, we saw, even though we had been in the ministry and we weren't really focusing on praying every day, but together. But when we started doing that, we began to go in one direction together, and it unified us so much more. And the power of prayer and the power of worship in our homes and families and marriages changed our lives and ministry. And we also go into, the importance of your relationship. And I know that sounds crazy because that's what marriage is, but relating to each other in situations where you can bond, and having times of dating and joy together, where you're relationally working together rather than just taking care of the kids. Okay, when are you going to go to the grocery store, and those kinds of things. It's so important that we prioritize, and we go into these things and see that couples, say, I've never experienced praying with my husband before, and this has changed our lives, and I'm so encouraged. And, God answers prayer. Matthew 18 talks about agreement in prayer and how important it is.
It is, especially in a marriage. It's amazing how many things, and I'm not speaking about anyone specific, especially not my husband, but I'll just go ahead and say, especially when women get together, there tends to be a spirit of kind of, my husband's not doing blah, blah, blah. One way to solve that, and I've actually begun to share this because I've seen it work in my own marriage, is if you pray for your husband, the Lord will, he either makes him less annoying to you or he makes him stop doing some of the annoying stuff. You can't tell which one it is.
That's a great way to put it.
It just happens. And then if you go the extra step and pray with your husband, you won't notice that he's annoying. The Lord will just blind you, like it was when you first got together in your first 6 months. Your husband never ever annoyed you. He was never annoying. The Lord will extend that out for you and let you experience some of that in the present day, instead of that first 6 month honeymoon and then it's over. And I tell people that all the time now, because I actually can say from my own experience, the more we pray together and the more I pray for him, the better our relationship is, which is what God has exemplified in making marriage, the husband and the wife, and then him. And that replicates the Godhead. He's three persons in one. He also says in his word that a tricord cannot be broken.
Yes.
And he talks about that, when you get together, if you have a hard task to do and you ask your brother to help you, woe to the man who falls and is alone, but a man who has a friend has someone to help him. And the friendship in a marriage relationship is very much like that scripture. So I think one of the things we have to do is commit to taking the time to do something like what you've created here. Like, instead of saying, well, we need to take a vacation, or we need to go do this or go do that, we need to find the time a week to do something like this. Like this should be a priority for couples.
Yes, and you bring up something, you're talking about the unity that's within the Godhead. That is just a small piece of what we bring out in session number 1, that I hope your listeners would really pursue the thought of what is the harmony like between the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. There's complete unity within them. There's complete love that goes back and forth each other. They're like a good singing group. They completely blend everything. It's not hierarchical. It's not like a hierarchy that's no, they submit to each other. They're constantly working with each other. What an amazing God we serve. And wouldn't it be great if marriages would work in that kind of a way, to where, there was such a partnership, such a unity.
So in tune with the Lord.
So in tune with the Lord to begin with, and then in tune with each other, and ordered as God intends within the home. So.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful, and it's a great goal for all of us to have, whether your marriage is 40 years on, or if it's like we're in our 20s. My husband and I have been married for over 20 years, and then there are others who've been, they're more at the 7 years, the 3 years, and there can be times where you're so overwhelmed. You're like, did I make the right choice? This is a crazy town. Marriage, kids, family. How am I going to get through all of this? Well, none of us are getting through this on our own. We're all doing it through the grace of God. He enables us to carry on. And I love when I meet people who are so in tune, like you and your wife are in a symbiotic relationship. You've been going for so long that you're spending all this time together, and it's not a burden to you or an exercise. It's the state of your marriage. And that to me is so encouraging for those of us who are coming along behind you. We can see, I don't spend as much time with my husband as you do with yours. But I definitely spend a ton of time with my husband compared to some other women that I know who, go out of town a lot and all of that. And I enjoy it. And I often wonder, what will it be like in 10 years? What will it be like in 20 years?
Right.
And the example that you're showing here is that it will be good, that God will continue to bless. Tell us, okay, so is each session an hour or an hour and a half? How long are the sessions?
Each session is about 35 to 40 minutes, something in that range.
So like a
37
TV
minutes.
show. Yeah.
Like a TV show,
Okay.
exactly,
Yeah.
with no commercials.
Well, and it's got discussion questions in the guide. And so,
Right.
you can talk about things. You could even go on a date and talk about it. If you want to fellowship with other Christians, I mean, brain science is saying that it's healthier to fellowship and worship together with other believers than to go to the gym, exercise, eat right, or sleep
really?
well. Yeah, it's actually healthier.
Barbie,
to fellowship.
You're speaking my language here. Tell
Yeah.
us more. I mean, it's hard to fit in the exercising, and the eating right is not as fun as not eating right. So,
well, and I wouldn't cut all of that out, but I am saying that, brain science is showing that when we get together in fellowship as believers, and certainly you could, as a couple, you could call a few of your friends over and say, hey, can we eat dinner together and pull out a video and do this for 6 weeks? Because I think we'll get some encouragement here and learn some things.
And it's a wonderful idea. And couples get together for other stuff, go to movies together, watch
Absolutely.
football. Yeah, so
That's
this could be
true.
one of those, especially with the length you're talking about, so 30 minutes or so. You actually have enough time to then eat afterwards. You could potluck that. Like, I'm having ideas.
Sure,
yeah.
you could. Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
okay, so what would be your number one selling point when people are done with this? What is your hope and prayer that they take away from the curriculum on the whole that they've just finished?
I would say I'm hoping that they'll pick up the prayer component, the praying together. To me, I know we've touched on that, but I think it's an integral part of what
So
we were doing, and we came
life-changing.
back to it a lot in the seminar, just because it's life changing. And I hate to admit, but I mean, Barbi and I have been married 36 years, been in the ministry, full-time ministry for 34 years, but for many, many years, we didn't make a daily practice of praying together as a couple. We would pray before our meals, we would pray for the kids, we would pray for this and that. But when we started praying together, it started to change everything.
Prayer changes things, and prayer is bringing revival all around the world as we lead worship and prayer. And we're seeing couples' lives change through getting intimate with God and worship Him together.
Fantastic. Terri, Barbi Franklin, it was so nice to meet you over the airwaves.
Thank you, Stacy.
Good to meet you.
Thank you so much for what you've done here. Go to afastore.net or call 877-927-4917. The entire program is $24.99. Be right back.
This is Uncommon Moments. Here's former Super Bowl winning NFL coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren sharing from their book Uncommon Marriage.
The Bible's number one instruction to a husband is to love his wife. And that means working hard to listen to her heart on issues and then striving to meet her needs. Sometimes for a man to be successful at loving his wife, he must put her ahead of himself. I have to remind myself that being head of the household doesn't mean I make all the decisions for our family.
Ephesians 5 says that a husband is to love his wife sacrificially, and Tony does that for me. Even after 30 years, we're still learning how to love each other, and that's what's exciting. An uncommon marriage is one where you never stop learning and never stop loving.
Tony and Lauren Dungy, authors of Uncommon Marriage, learning about lasting love and overcoming life's obstacles together. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
Stand by. The BSAC radio show spotlights Christian rap artists.
You never try to put me on the pedestal. The Lord is working on me. I'm getting better still.
Hear in-depth interviews and news about upcoming releases.
What's your motivation? Jesus, he's our motivation.
BSAC is the Biblically Sound Artist Coalition. Don't miss the BSAC radio show. Saturdays from 10 a.m. to noon Central on Urban Family Talk.
Stephen Black.
Because my molester spoke to me while being molested that I had somehow caused this. I had a deep sense of darkness and shame. The thing that I see in others is ministering to them, this deep sense of shame. And that's what brings about healing once that is discovered that their innocence was taken from them.
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is coming June 20th through the 22nd. Learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Securing America.
China is stealing technology secrets from other nations in an effort to modernize its military, according to a new Pentagon report.
China's continuing use of cyber theft, its targeted investment, its exploitation of private Chinese nationals' access to foreign military technology, all to support its modernization goals.
Randall Shriver, Assistant Secretary for Defense for Indo-Pacific Security Affairs, says the cyber threat from China is persistent.
The Chinese remain very aggressive in their use of cyber. What's changed is our level of awareness and the steps we're taking to reduce our own vulnerabilities and working with partners and allies to do the same.
The report says China has been able to acquire anti-submarine and aviation warfare technologies. China is also working to develop hypersonic missiles, which can travel many times the speed of sound as the nation ramps up military spending. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
So surprised to see conservative thinkers like James Woods banned from Twitter and Paul Watson banned from Facebook. Donald J. Trump retweeted your tweet. Thank you, Mr. President. Very cool. But while tweets are nice, we need action. A handful of giant corporations have seized control of the new public square and are digitally disappearing dissidents. The first rule of Facebook is don't talk about anyone who Mark Zuckerberg doesn't like, otherwise you'll be banned by Facebook. This isn't a joke. It's literally their new policy. They're not just banning people. They're dictating the opinions that everyone on the platform is allowed to have. Merely appearing in a photo or a video with someone who Mark Zuckerberg doesn't like is now enough to get you banned. This is virtually identical to the communist Chinese social credit score system, but instead it's controlled by giant corporations with more power than some countries. Except at least in China it's written down so you know how to stay in compliance.
So that's Paul Joseph Watson talking about his ban from Facebook and his point there that what we have traditionally railed against for China, what we've said about China. And I have to be so perfectly clear here. And welcome back to the show. Call lines are open at 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. Look, I've said it a million times. Other people who are much more scholarly and advanced and accomplished than I have said it. Communism stunts growth, it stunts creativity, it eliminates the impetus by which human beings seek to better their circumstances and the circumstances of those around them. If you know that if you create something wonderful and the government thinks you're doing it out of some kind of, like you think you're so hot that you could be hauled away to a gulag, you're not going to do it. There's something innately repressive about the idea that everyone has to be exactly the same and only the government knows best. Look at what China is doing to their Christian populations. They're burning their churches to the ground. They're making them remove the crosses. They're taking their Bibles and replacing them with communist Bibles that say that the state is who you should worship, that the leader of their country is who you should ultimately bow down to and give all of your allegiance to. That stunts creativity. And so they could have 6 billion people in China. And they would never be able to match the creativity that comes out of the United States because we have gifts that God has endowed us with. And instead of our government saying, we gave you those gifts, we're the reason why you have those gifts, or your gifts belong to us, our government, under our Constitution, says, God, our Creator, gave you gifts. He gave you rights. He gave you responsibilities. Our job as the government is to enshrine those gifts and abilities and freedoms in a way that they can't be infringed upon, not by the government, not by your fellow citizens, and not by foreigners. As long as we hold on to that, we'll continue to pump out the creativity that, and the other thing is there's nothing like an American mom. And I'm not saying that because we don't have our share of bad moms or moms that are, poverty stricken or what have you. But if you look at the things that, look at any successful person, and you'll often find that it's their mom, their parents, their mom and their dad. There's someone that poured into them. Maybe it's their grandparent, maybe it's an uncle, but it's a family member. But primarily it's moms and dads who pour into these kids. And what comes back out is the kids are gifted and they go out and they have something to do. And if you think about it, just boil it all down to this. If you believe, and you've been told since the time you could hear words, that you were created for a purpose and that God has a plan for your life, you are much more likely to say, wow, I noticed that, computers are awful and they have black screens with green letters. I think computers should look like the pages of a book and should be interactive. And I also think that computers should be fun and not just utilitarian. And there you have Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. I think we should be able to do this in sports or that in sports. Just think of the innovations that we have here in this country and how people are constantly coming up with it. It starts on late night infomercials. You'll see someone and they're like literally sweating, kind of like I'm doing. They're like all excited saying, oh my goodness, there's just this product I've made is so great and you've got to try it. 2 payments of $19.99. Before you know it, that product's on QVC, and the next thing you know, it's at Walmart and you can buy it. The ads seen on TV section at your Walgreens. These are people who saw a need and they made it. There's a guy here who lives here in St. Louis. They live in the city, and his wife was a dog. She still is. She's a dog groomer, and she used to come home at night and complain because all of the brushes they had to groom the dogs with had a kind of a defect in the way she would hold it and the way that they would comb the dog. Is basically they're combing for the dogs that have fur. They're trying to comb out the under fur to get that out of the dog so that the dog sheds less. So she complained about it, and her husband said to her one weekend, he said, what would the brush look like? Like if you had a comb and you had a brush, what would they look like if you could make it whatever you wanted so it would work well for you? And so she drew a crude line drawing out on a sheet of paper of the comb and the brush. The husband went into his garage. They had a detached garage with tools and, woodworking equipment. He made the brush and then gave it to her, and she used it at work, and her coworkers wanted one. So he started making them and she started selling them. Now they sell these brushes all over the country, and most groomers, if you have a dog that needs to be groomed, if you ask them about this brush, I can't remember what it's called, but I remember her telling the story to me. I was at a luncheon and she's telling the story to me and a group of other women. That's how it came to be. But you can't have people creating products that serve a need in your country if your country says to people, everyone has to think exactly the same way. Everyone has to worship the same way. Everyone has to have just the one kid. Everyone has to work in the job that they're assigned by the government. And everyone has to agree that communism is the only way, that we are your overlords and you belong to us. You have to look that up if you don't get that reference. So that's the difference. It will always be the difference. And we were even more, it's hard to believe, but we were even more creative when we had the Bible in schools, when we had kids learning that you're not just some animal. You're not some glorified animal. You are God's creation, made in the image of the living God, the God who created everything seen and unseen, who has always been and always will be, the God who literally said, I'd like to see planets. I'm going to make a universe. And then all of the things he made, he created them out of his own mind. And that he is ultimately, in spite of all of that magnificence, the utter glory and beauty and utter indescribability of God, he's still deeply and just absolutely obsessively interested in each and every one of us, and that he can have relationship with all of us at the same time and not ever be tired, not ever need a rest, not ever take a nap, not ever need a vacation. That knowledge, that's the spark of creativity that the Chinese want to replicate. And since they cannot replicate it without admitting that their system is a failed one that only brings death and destruction, they then choose to steal from us. And they've been very good at it because we've had a lot of limp-wristed morons, lunatics, and idiots in charge of our country, negotiating with the Chinese and giving them everything that they want. And now that we finally have someone who is willing to say, not today, Zergy baby, not today. Now we have people screaming and losing their minds, deranged beyond all belief because they just can't handle it. And so I got off on that tangent because Paul Joseph Watson is talking about communism and China and their totalitarian rule over their people. And he's comparing it quite aptly to Facebook. And in this next bit, oh my goodness, he said so many great things in this video, and I don't know if I put it up yet. I'll have to make sure it's up at Facebook if you want to link up to it. But he's saying things on here that are so bedrock conservative, bedrock freedom and liberty type beliefs that it's hard to comprehend that we don't have this audio playing everywhere around the country, that teenagers aren't listening to it, and somebody hasn't gone out and made a Paul Joseph Watson t-shirt about how he's speaking about this. Now there is some audio from Snoop Dogg, who literally has called out his followers to post all the things about Minister Farrakhan, which you guys, obviously I don't agree with Minister Farrakhan's beliefs, his statements, any of that stuff. But under the First Amendment, he has every right to express himself. And the question has now become, which of these actions by Facebook follows along with what they've agreed to in their deal with our government, that they can't be sued, that they have immunity from lawsuits over libel and slander, et cetera, et cetera. So here is Paul Joseph Watson again, talking about Snoop Dogg being better at the First Amendment than most conservatives. It's number 3.
How dangerous is InfoWars? Well, Facebook believes it's so dangerous that you can be banned from using the platform, Facebook, just for sharing its content unless you simultaneously denounce it. Let that penetrate for just one moment. Think about it just for a second. Mark Zuckerberg is not simply censoring opinions. He's prescribing which political opinions you're allowed to have, which conversations all of us in this country can have about America. Keep in mind that nobody voted for Mark Zuckerberg. He's 34 years old. He's completely cut off from reality. He's worth $72 billion. And yet he can single-handedly make our First Amendment irrelevant after 250 years.
I mean, how tragic is it that Snoop Dogg, who encouraged his 32 million followers to flood Facebook and Instagram with Louis Farrakhan videos, has a better grasp of the principle of freedom of speech than 90% of journalists? The same journalists who whine about Trump targeting the media, then pop champagne corks when anyone on the right gets silenced. This has nothing to do with hate, whatever that means. This is about you beginning to lose the argument culturally and politically.
So I want to make a point about the fact that he highlighted that Mark Zuckerberg is worth $72 billion. So he's also a proponent of open borders. He thinks that the people from the third world should all be allowed to come live here in America. But in the same token, he's bought up all of the vacant property around him and the properties that are owned by people. He just would come in and make them an outrageous offer that they couldn't refuse so he could buy their land and raise their house so that he could have a buffer zone around his property of, miles and miles and miles. So in other words, you can't just drive up to his house without him knowing about it, because you have to enter the perimeter of his property and then drive and drive and drive and drive and drive. And you have to know where you're going, because he, like I said, he's bought up whole subdivisions around his home to give himself a buffer zone, because he believes that, us regular folks who aren't worth $70 billion, we're not the ones he wants to be rubbing elbows with, unless we work for Facebook and he's their overlord, So there's one thing I want to point out about that money, though, that $72 billion. $72 billion means that Mark Zuckerberg, instead of buying up the properties around his home, he could literally hire entire companies to go down to South America. He could hire mercenaries to take out drug lords. Come on, we're talking about operating outside of the United States. He could hire companies to go down and construct entire subdivisions down there. He could put all kinds of companies themselves. Remember, we've seen this with so many basketball players and football players. When they get a realization of how much money they're making, $22 million a year, once they bought a couple of houses and some cars and, they've set their family up, they start to think, I could go back in my neighborhood and I could, and you see them do that. They'll go in their neighborhood and they'll hire everybody that they graduated from high school with that doesn't have a job, and they give them jobs. They start companies. Shaquille O'Neal owns like 1 million McDonald's franchises because that was what he wanted to do. He's employing people. He's realized that outside of enriching himself, he can actually make a difference in the lives of other people with the money that he earns that is so outrageous. The money he earns is so outrageous. So he's set up for life himself, but he's gone back and poured into. And my question about Mark Zuckerberg is, How does he, with $72 billion, spend all of his time mining our data and sharing our personal private information, but he's never once said, I'm going to go down to South America, to Venezuela, Honduras, any one of these countries, and I'm going to, instead of sitting up and meeting with world leaders and trying to figure out how I can help China have more Facebook and more control over their people and clamp down on them and help them with their social scoring system, how about if I stay in my own hemisphere? How about if I help my fellow Americans by giving people who live in South America who are breaking into our country an opportunity in their own country? I mean, I'm not exaggerating here. $72 billion. Look, President Trump, look at the things he was able to do philanthropically before he became the president, and he was worth what, $5 billion? $5 billion. Now, I know you're probably sitting there listening to this. You might be driving or whatever you're doing, and you're like, $5 billion is hard to wrap your mind around. It is for me too. When I look at our budget and then I think about $5 billion, those are not in the same universe, right? It's not something I'm used to working with. Those numbers, that I just don't know anything about it. But then you take from $5 billion, you go over here to $72 billion. And this man is sitting up at work right now reading your DMs to your husband in your Facebook account. Give me a break. All right. I want to give you this info again. If you loved Barbi and Terri Franklin from last segment, afastore.net or call 877-927-4917. 877-927-4917, $24.99. God bless from the heartland. Stick around for onenewsnow.com news and information.
Being there is half the battle. 1milliondads.com exists to help Christian fathers to be present and intentional in the lives of their children. Our hope is to wake up the fearsome wonder that is the mighty man of God and restore him to his role as leader, teacher, and counselor. Visit 1milliondads.com. 1milliondads.com.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren says the House of Representatives should begin impeachment proceedings against President Trump. The Democratic presidential candidate reiterated today her call for impeachment on the Senate floor, hours after Majority Leader McConnell declared case closed on the Russia probe and potential obstruction by President Trump.
It's now been more than 6 weeks since Special Counsel Bob Mueller, the former FBI director, concluded his investigation into Russia's interference in our 2016 election and delivered his findings to the Justice Department. It's been 2 weeks since Attorney General William Barr made the 450-page report public. This investigation went on for 2 years. It's finally over.
Holding a copy of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report, Senator Warren responded to McConnell that wishing won't make it so, adding, quote, "It's there in black and white." Georgia's governor has signed an important new pro-life bill into law. Evan Brown reports.
Georgia has quite a large-reaching film and television production industry, but a number of Hollywood performers threaten to boycott working in the state if it should pass a law outlawing abortion after detecting a fetal heartbeat early in the first trimester. Governor Brian Kemp signed it anyway.
A declaration that all life has value, that all life matters, and that all life is worthy of protection.
The previous law allowed abortion in Georgia up until 20 weeks. Planned Parenthood had said they would sue over it.
Another community has declared itself a so-called Second Amendment sanctuary. Tom Graham has that story.
As several left-leaning communities declare themselves sanctuaries for immigrants and refuse to cooperate with federal law enforcement, there's a growing response from pro-Second Amendment cities. The second Rhode Island town is opposing certain state gun laws. The move is in response to a proposed crackdown by Democrat Governor Gina Raimondo. She wants to outlaw high-capacity magazines and guns deemed assault weapons. The Hopkinton Town Council passing a resolution this week to effectively ignore new laws they feel infringe on their Second Amendment rights.
A new report from the United Nations says 1 million species of plants and animals are threatened with extinction. According to researchers, man-made climate change is partly to blame, but skeptic Mark Morano of Climate Depot doesn't buy it.
They handpick scientists, put them together, and then politicians and bureaucrats go line by line over the summary, and then the scientists have to go back and make the report fit what the politicians and bureaucrats demand. In other words, it's a giant narrative talking point document that is very far removed from any scientific process.
Researchers also blame loss of habitat, overfishing, pollution, and invasive species. New technology is making many lighthouses obsolete, but Alina Shirazi spoke to one man who's fighting to preserve them in Key Largo, Florida.
What started as a hobby for Eric Martin developed into his life's work.
I eventually became somebody to try to help save and restore lighthouses.
Martin's latest project is to preserve 4 historic lighthouses in the Florida Keys. The Coast Guard owns them, but says they no longer serve a purpose thanks to advanced GPS systems. Nonprofits and restoration groups like his can claim first. If those groups are rejected, Martin says the public will then get the chance to buy the structures in an auction. Members of lighthouse preservation groups say they are trying their best to save a part of history slowly crumbling into the water. In Key Largo, Florida, Alina Shirazi, Fox News.
And Beverly Hills is considering outlawing the sale of tobacco products, a move that would make the glamorous California city the first in the nation to enact such a ban. The draft ordinance going before the Beverly Hills City Council tonight would exempt only 3 existing high-end cigar lounges. A report prepared for the City Council cites the city's advocacy of healthy living and outlines the extensive adverse effects of tobacco use. Find more news at onenewsnow.com.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. We desire to be a movement of time tellers. In 1 Chronicles 12:32 it says, "The sons of Issachar were men who had understanding of the time, to know what Israel ought to do." In these perilous times, God is raising up a people of discernment who will see, pray, and act. We sound the alarm as watchmen. We cry aloud that God's people may be activated for his service. Join the movement at urbanfamilytalk.com.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Georgia is a state that values life. We protect the innocent. We champion the vulnerable. We stand up and speak for those unable to speak for themselves. Through the Life Act, we will allow precious babies to grow up and realize their full God-given potential.
Instead of trying to engage on a level playing field and, actually doing some work, you merely silence the dissent. This is classic authoritarianism. This is the rhetoric of authoritarian tyrants, yet we're the dangerous ones. Really?
I don't know of any president in our lifetime who's carried as many negative burdens from the political class as President Trump has. I think as we get beyond that, as he continues to do a good job, his numbers are going to keep going up. And as people realize, you may or may not like his style, but you sure have to like his results.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Okay. Yeah. I do like his style. I like the results, too. And I'm fine with everything that comes along with the package. I'm fine with it. If you've grown up at all and you understand, you know that people are people. And you got to take the good with the bad and pray for them and keep on rolling. So welcome to the program. We have so much to get to today. We have this story about the program that actual immigrants will be able to be arrested by local law enforcement. And that's a new program that's been announced by ICE. So that's good news. Anything that helps us get to where we need to get to with, apprehending unlawful people who are unlawfully present. We got to get to that. We got to do it. So first off, let's get to that story. We are also going to be chatting with Diante Johnson, president of the Black Conservative Federation, this hour. Diante is a friend of mine, and he's got so much going on, and he's really doing a lot of organizing. He's a millennial, younger guy. He's doing a lot to make sure that what we have going on here in this country is representative, to organize young people who are leaning towards being conservatives, to give them that option of knowing that, you can be Black and be a conservative. You can be Hispanic and be a conservative. This is not the party of old white men by any stretch of the imagination. It's good work, and I'm so glad to see him doing it. And so he'll be with us. And then we will finally get to the Bidens and their Ukraine problem. That'll be in the last segment. So right now, Immigration and Customs Enforcement has announced just on Monday, actually, that they have a new program that will allow local law enforcement officers to start arresting and temporarily detaining immigrants on behalf of the agency, even if established local policies prevent them from doing so. So this is them coming around to the realization that the federal government can circumvent the sanctuary city status designation. Not only can the federal government circumvent it, they must. They must in the interest of public health and safety. So local jurisdictions that join the new program will be temporarily exempted from any local or state rules preventing them from cooperating in immigration arrest or detention, and allow them to execute arrest warrants issued by ICE. ICE will have 48 hours to transfer any immigrant arrested and detained under the program into its custody, or the immigrant will be released. Policies that limit cooperation with ICE undermine public safety, prevent the agency from executing its federally mandated mission, and increase the risk for officers forced to make at-large arrests in unsecure locations. This is a statement from Director Matthew Albence. He's the acting ICE director. The Warrant Service Officer Program will protect communities from criminal aliens who threaten vulnerable populations with violence, drugs, and gang activity by allowing partner jurisdictions the flexibility to take immigration arrests in their jail or correctional facility. The agency said the new program was made at the request of the National Sheriff's Association and the Major County Sheriffs of America. So law enforcement officials want this help. They want the federal government to give them the tools they need to do their jobs, and they're responding. Now, the ACLU, what do you think I'm going to say here? You know what I'm going to say. They're against it. They've condemned it. They call it the latest scheme by ICE to enlist the local police in their abusive deportation agenda. Now, I don't see anything abusive about deportation. Do you? You're here illegally. You're breaking the law. You are under threat of deportation. You are deported. There's nothing abusive about that. That's the following of the law. So the agency explicitly aims to subvert the will of local communities that have passed ordinances to prevent exactly this kind of cooperation between police and ICE. Now, that's ACLU's Deputy Political Director, Lorella Pirelli. Probably not an American. Okay, I'm sorry. She may be an American. Participants would be forced to carry the financial burden of ICE's aggression, potentially costing the state millions in operational expenses and legal fees. Now, they're not worried about the money. That's not it at all. She says here that local communities have passed ordinances to prevent exactly this kind of cooperation. Well, what kind of communities would pass sanctuary city ordinances? Those that want to house illegal aliens. So she's admitting that people who want to help other people break the law have passed ordinances to facilitate that, and that this subverts their will. Yes, we should be subverting the will of lawbreakers. That is what the law enforcement community exists to do. They exist to investigate and bring criminals to justice. I mean, how is this woman an attorney and political director for ACLU and she doesn't know that? She's urging people to, quote unquote, resist anyway. President Trump announced on Sunday he would nominate former Border Patrol Chief Mark Morgan, who led the division during the final months of the Obama administration, to be the new head of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Former acting ICE director Ronald Vitello resigned last month after the president said he wanted to take the agency in a tougher direction, which was the honorable thing for him to do. I support that kind of action. If your boss is taking the whatever in a direction that you're not interested in going in, kindly move yourself along. There's better opportunities out there for you that better suit your skill set and your temperament, and let someone else who's ready to pony up and saddle that thing and herd it into the area it needs to go into, let them do that. There's somebody out there who's willing to crack the whip and get it done. If it's not you, God bless, off you go. So this is just nothing but a good news piece, honestly. It's not even Friday, but that's all good news. So now I thought, and y'all know how wishy-washy and sometimey I am with Mitch McConnell. He is somebody who has done some good things recently, but he's also done some bad things. He's come out against the president on immigration, and I just hate that. I hate it. But when he does something good, I like to give him kudos because I want to help him. I want Mitch McConnell to be the best that he can be. And I think he has some ways to go to get there. That being said, this morning he took to the Senate floor and he got his little blowtorch out and he lit it up, and then he aimed it at the Democrats and he put some accelerant in front of it and lit them on fire. And it was kind of delicious because he never talks fast. He's from Kentucky, right? So he never talks super fast. But when he's making a rude point, if you watch him on the Senate floor, he gets to smiling about what he's saying because he knows he's lighting you up and he's enjoying himself. And so you have to kind of, I enjoy it. I enjoy when he gets to enjoying himself lighting up the Democrats. It doesn't happen often enough, in my opinion. But here is one of those cases, and I don't even know if I got the very best part, but you're going to have to listen to this whole thing. He really takes his time to singe the edges first and then light up the middle. It's number 5.
For many of the president's opponents, it quickly morphed into something else. A last hope that maybe they'd never have to come to terms with the American people's choice of a president. In some corners, Special Counsel Mueller came to be regarded as a kind of secular saint, destined to rescue the country from the inconvenient truth that the American people actually elected Donald Trump. For 2 years, many of the president's opponents seemed to be hoping the worst conspiracy theories were actually true. They seemed to be hoping for a national crisis for the sake of their own politics. Now, look, I will say it was at least heartening to see many of my Democratic colleagues and the media abruptly awaken to the dangers of Russian aggression. An awakening to the dangers of Russian aggression. Remember, not long ago, Democrats mocked Republicans like John McCain and Mitt Romney for warning about the dangers posed by Putin's Russia. Remember President Obama's quip back in 2012 when then Governor Romney emphasized his concerns with Russia. Here's what President Obama said when Mitt Romney emphasized his concerns with Russia back in 2012. Direct quote, "The 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back."
So he took his time to lay out all of the different instances in which the Democrats are flip-flopping around like fish on dry land in order to, shall we say, accommodate their sudden revulsion of everything having to do with Russia. When Kislyak, a diplomat from Russia, used to be one of their favorite guests at all of their events. They would invite him to the State of the Union. He always sat with the Democrats. They invited him to all of their cocktail parties. He was a favorite on the Democrat cocktail party circuit. The ambassador from Russia, it was Kislyak, and he was their guy. I mean, he spent so much time with them that, remember, you must remember the famous non-quote hot mic caught Barack Obama telling, I guess he's the equivalent of the vice president of Russia. He's, number 2 to Putin. He said, After my election, I'll have more flexibility. And the guy said, I will transmit this to Vladimir. And nobody batted an eye. Nora O'Donnell didn't call for Barack Obama to be removed from office. Anderson Cooper didn't find himself about ready to faint, with a little bit of perspiration on his upper lip from the utter shock of it all. Brian Stelter hadn't whined about it at all. I don't even think he knew it happened. If he did, he just brushed it right on off and went back to looking at Republican wrongdoing. So, they haven't always hated Russia. That's the truth right there. And it's fine, love them or leave them. You do you. Nobody is trying to make Democrats have feelings they don't have or thoughts they shouldn't have. It's just, to be honest, I feel the same as Mitch McConnell. I'm just tired of listening to them whine about 2016. I mean, you would think that the Democrats would actually be sick of hearing us whine about 2018 when they took the House. But you don't see the Republicans whining about losing the House. I mean, it was definitely it wasn't a good day. It wasn't a good look, but they're not whining about it. But the Democrats are still whining about 2016, still trying to find a way to erase it. And it's just not going away. It's just like when I say YouTube is forever, so is 2016. It's what happened. The same thing we had to go through, only we did so quietly. Barack Obama was elected the president. We were all in a state of panic, and then we got on with our lives. That's what y'all need to do, Democrats. Get on with it. Stop this madness. But there's another reason that they want to undo the results of the 2016 election, and that is because they have been caught spying on an American citizen. They've been caught using opposition research documents like the dossier to justify FISA warrant applications. They have been caught literally text messaging each other about how they're going to undo the results of the 2016 election. And so if they can't impeach President Trump, they have to admit that, number one, they were in the wrong and he wasn't. And number two, he's probably going to get reelected, which will be like a nightmare. If you think that androgynous individual sitting on the ground screaming and wailing, which is one of the favorite memes on the right, you can find it everywhere at any point in the day in a 24-hour cycle. You can find it on somebody on Twitter using that gif of that person on the ground screaming to the sky about Donald Trump being the president. You can find it anywhere because it so universally represents what the Democrats are feeling right now, which is they're screaming at the sun because they just can't stop what happened in 2016. Still. We'll see that again in 2020 if they don't figure something out. And I hope they don't, but I'm just saying. All right, when we get back, we'll have Diante Johnson. Stay right there.
Here's American Family Association President Tim Wildman.
Lynn Ingram and Jim Duncan, two Texans, support and believe in our ministry here at AFA and AFR.
We know more about the laundry business than anything else. We know a little bit about a lot of things, but we know a lot about the laundry and dry cleaning business.
They created a laundry detergent to sell to folks to support AFA.
We just want to be able to provide a product that can be used by AFA to support the ministry.
When you wash your family's clothes with Redeem Clean laundry detergent, you can take great satisfaction in knowing that you're supporting the vital work of the American Family Association. It's a unique way to increase your giving to AFA. For clean laundry and support of a cleaner society, it's Redeem Clean. Learn more about the Redeem Clean products when you visit redeemclean.afastore.net.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
The Supreme Court justices may be forgiven for having a feeling of deja vu. For the third time, the justices had to deal with a case in which the president was given power by Congress and then challenged because he used that power. First, it was the travel ban. Then it was the president's national emergency declaration in order to build the wall. Finally, it were the oral arguments about whether a citizenship question should be put in the 2020 census. All three of these cases have a number of things in common. The Constitution grants certain powers to Congress. Congress delegates those powers to the president. Then President Trump uses those powers in a way that Democrats don't like, and a federal court case ensues. You probably have already thought of a solution to this ongoing problem. Congress should stop delegating their power to the president. I'll deal with that topic in my next commentary, but you might wonder why Congress keeps doing this. Here's a secret that few political commentators mention. When the leader of your party is in power, you don't have a problem when he uses that power. But as soon as someone of the other party, especially if it's Donald Trump, gets into power, you go crazy. This case before the Supreme Court should be fairly simple. Congress delegated to the Secretary of Commerce the power to determine the form and content of the census. You may not like what he decided, but that's what the law stipulated decades ago. David French, in a recent commentary, says here is where we see the biggest contrast between progressive and conservative approaches to jurisprudence. The liberal progressive sees the problem and demands the court fix the problem. The conservative looks at the same pattern and says, if you don't like the law, change it. Congress has had numerous opportunities to change the law and did not. Therefore, I predict that at least 5 conservative justices on the court will rule in favor of the Trump administration. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Socialism, go to viewpoints.info/socialism. That's viewpoints.info/socialism.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
All right, welcome back to the show. While we are still working on our guest, let us listen to, this is a bit of audio that I didn't get to last segment. It's House Judiciary Committee Ranking Member Doug Collins talking about the Democrats moving to hold Attorney General Barr in contempt of Congress. He says that the Democrats are trying to undo the results of the 2016 election. And while he's right, there's a little bit more to it. And that is the temperament of the Democrats in leadership when they control the House in comparison to when the Republicans control the House. Interesting fact. The Republicans waited almost 450 days to hold then Attorney General Eric Holder in contempt of Congress for refusing to cooperate with subpoenas for information about, I believe it was Fast and Furious. They actually just waited and waited and waited. Here we are 41 days since the original subpoenas were sent to Barr, and they're already moving to vote to hold him in contempt of Congress. 41, 441, something like that. It's like almost 450 days the Republicans waited. So just keep that in mind when people say, we're trying to rein in this and that. No, that's not what you're doing. We can see right through it. It's number 6.
They're doing this 12 times faster than the Republicans held Eric Holder in contempt. Over 460-something days before the Republicans held Eric Holder in contempt for not complying with subpoenas. We're looking at less than 43 days here. My question is do you dislike the president that much? Do you dislike the findings of the Mueller report that much that you're trying to solve every other way to get the American public focused on the fact that you don't have an agenda for America, that you don't have anything to put forward, and you would rather just attack this president, who is, by the way, look at the economy. Look at the lowest unemployment in 50 years. Look at all the things that are happening. They want to distract you from that to focus on something they know is already been settled in the report.
So there's a kind of idiocy to the way that this is being handled. And the reason why it can't be handled well, or it can't go well, or it can't be something that just is smooth and executed well is because it all hinges on, they had their bad candidate. They had 2 bad candidates because Bernie wasn't a good candidate. He wouldn't have been good for America. And a new poll out actually illustrates why Bernie Sanders is a waste of air, space, and time. And I don't mean his life. I mean him being in the political sphere as a democratic socialist. What am I talking about? Well, the poll said that 90% of Americans they're not in favor of socialism. Now, when you break the numbers out, it's more like 45% have no opinion of socialism at all. 42% have a negative view of it. And when you dig down further, it's mostly Democrats who are toying around with it and trying to make it work. But I may have shared this on the show before, but one of the most illustrative things about the socialism that I've ever heard, because my mom is a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat, and she loved Barack Obama, still does. And she voted for Hillary Clinton against Donald Trump. But when Bernie Sanders became a thing, and it was Hillary Clinton and then, Bernie Sanders. I asked my mom, I said, is it disturbing to you at all that the Democrats are running a socialist? He's in the primary. And she said, oh, he's not going to go anywhere. I said, he's gaining traction with the young people. And she said, look, Democrats aren't perfect. I don't vote for them because they're perfect. But I tell you what, we all know socialism is bad. She said, there's no way I'm ever voting for a socialist. Now, I'll admit, my mom's pretty smart. So, and she's older, obviously. She's my mom. But she articulated something that I heard a lot over the course of, like, from anybody who was maybe 40 and older. People would say, oh, socialism, we all know that's horrible. We're not doing anything with that. But with the younger ones, they'd say, well, he's like my granddad, or he's like my uncle, or he's someone I feel like I could have a beer with. He understands my situation. I'm like, but he's a socialist. That's just democratic socialism, which isn't the same as actual socialism. That's what people would say to me. Like, so the point to that is that Americans on the whole, by and large, understand that capitalism is it's integral to the system that makes it possible for us to live that we do the way that we do. And I implore you, when I say that, sometimes after the show, I'll be thinking, I said, capitalism is integral to the way that we live. And it is. It's not more important than our faith, but it is a system by which we are able to engage in a free market. And it enables that. But then we have to remember that this stuff comes from God. And unfettered capitalism is not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about capitalism with no limits. I'm talking about capitalism that is restrained, and it's only fit for a moral people, a morally upright people, where we would be philanthropic, which Americans are. We're the most philanthropic nation on the face of the planet. But I just want to say right here on the air, for the record, we got to be thanking God that this is what we have. If you look at what the Venezuelans are going through, if you think about how hard it is to be hungry, because we Americans, we don't really know that sensation. When we say, I'm peckish, we really are peckish. We're just slightly hungry. We are not hungry. We are not starving. So Venezuelans are. We have to thank God that we have this system. I was just at the Sam's Club picking up some glasses for daughter, the youngest. She had her new prescription. And when we were picking them up, they had some hydrangea bushes, some pretty big ones, on sale for $20 a pop at the Sam's Club. And so we have this one area where we'd ripped out this huge yew bush because it had beehives in it. And nobody wanted to get near it to trim it because they were afraid of the bees coming out. So we had it taken out. And so there's this big, huge open area with nothing but mulch there. And so I thought, these would look good there. And as I was digging the hole and, you start to get to sweating and thinking, why am I doing this to myself? That mulch looked fine. But then I got them in and my husband was like, oh, those look nice, and he helped a little bit too. And then the kids even mentioned, oh, that looks nice, Mom. That looks good. And I was like, yeah. And then I just thought about how much I love hydrangea bushes. I love the way they look. I love the head of the flower is so huge. And I love to see them out in other places. Like when a business will use hydrangeas, a row of them, I just love going over and kind of taking a look and seeing what kind of hydrangea it is, if I can recognize it or what have you. And I just had to say, thank you, Lord, for these hydrangea bushes. Thank you for letting us be able to garden and to be able to do, just thank you. We have to keep that attitude, because as weird as it is to say, the truth is we don't have any guarantee we'll never be like the Venezuelans. We have enough people in America right now who don't understand the capitalist system, who have not had a good civics class, who they think democratic socialism is something that could work here, that they could theoretically flip this if we're not diligent and if we don't keep praying over our country. So, that is what it is. So I also, and we still, okay, perfect. Awesome. We have our guest. Diante is the president of the Black Conservative Federation. Diante Johnson, thank you for joining the show today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's talk about this. Effective messaging for minority communities. Now, I've actually given a speech about effective messaging for minority communities, what the GOP could do for Americans for Prosperity. It was a few years ago. I did 2 of these, actually. I did one for AFP at one of their summits, and it was a detailed PowerPoint presentation that lasts about 25 minutes. And then I did another one for Leadership Program of the Rockies, where I talked about how Republicans have to message values to people instead of talking at them about capitalism and freedom and liberty and waving flags and watching Eagles soar. We have to actually get into people's neighborhoods, into their faces, knock on their doors, talk to them one-on-one, retail politics, and a bunch of other stuff. What are your ideas?
One of the things that we should do
I'm not sure what's going on with the phone line because I'm not sure what we just heard there. If that was radio feedback or okay, we've lost him. We'll try to get him back. And the point that I'm making about having given those presentations is that there were both a number of years ago. Like one of them, I saw the reminder that I was in Colorado at the Leadership Program of the Rockies giving the speech. That was like 6 years ago. And I have not seen the suggestions that I made to that huge audience taken up by the GOP here in Missouri or elsewhere. We have to stop being complacent and get out there and actually make something happen. So it looks like we're getting him back. Okay. All right. Diante, thanks for coming back on.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened.
Okay, so what were you saying there? Because we couldn't really hear it. It sounded like a computer thing.
Okay. So we have to be able to engage and not cause enrage within our community. That's one of the biggest things that we as Republicans have to do, because I think sometimes we as conservatives can sometimes turn people off with just promoting the policies. And I tell people not just engaging, but also disagreeing without being disagreeable. And so if I'm pro-life and someone is pro-choice, I can't say, oh, you're an idiot because you're pro-choice. I have to then say, you're pro-choice, I'm pro-life. May I ask why you're pro-choice? What events led you to become you have to ask those questions to where you're not offending the other person, the other party. But also, when it comes to messaging, we have to realize that, especially for minorities, minority voters are very much emotional and sensitive voters. Okay? And so because of that, they're easily offended. So one of the reasons, and so beyond just saying, I said pro-choice, offending them, one of the things another example of what offends them is the use of the term plantation. It's one of my biggest pet peeves as a conservative is we use the term leave the Democratic plantation. You're confused. You're this, you're that. And it's so negative because not only are we going to insult them by saying that they are being controlled, but we're also going to use a slave reference to a black community. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, I try not to use it. I did, 10 years ago, I would sometimes say that. And I remember thinking to myself, actually, it was not just me thinking to myself. My husband said, he was like, I don't know if I really agree with that terminology. And I was like, tell me why. And he basically said the same thing you just said. And he said, there's another way for you to express that. You are a wordy person. Find another way to say that you left that behind. You made a switch, you changed your mind, whatever. And he said, because that's probably going to cut you off from people who need to hear what you have to say. And so I just kind of phased it out of my language. And I have mentioned that to others, but sometimes people are really invested in using that terminology, and I don't know that it's helpful. And for me, it's not that I want to tell people what to say, Diante, but I have the same desire that you have, that I would love people to listen to our ideas and give us a chance based on what they could possibly benefit from it, instead of being hung up on the words we're using.
Well, and it's just as, and I tell people this, and when people argue with me, they say, "Oh, but it's just a reference. It's just a reference." I say, "Okay, well, when Black Democrats started using references against Black Republicans, how does that make you feel?"
Oh, I hate it.
Because I remember, being, and I still get it, I guess. I don't know. I don't pay attention to it anymore. But the Black Democrats, when they're very derogatory against Black Republicans and using negative terminology, it doesn't make me want to become a Democrat again. It doesn't make me want to go back to the Democrat Party. It actually draws me further away. And we have to understand the same thing is, if we want to attract people to our party, the Bible says, and they'll know we are Christians by our love. We have to show love and compassion.
I've noticed that when we talk to them, it's better. I've noticed that when it's a conversation, it's better. But they come into it mistrusting us, and to be honest with you, Diante, I don't trust them very much either. So it's you're coming into a dance where nobody really wants to be there, and you have to have a conversation out of it. So it is hard. You have to find better words.
Well, I'll say this. When they come not trusting us, but sometimes you got to understand, and I had to realize this, is sometimes we as conservatives do a little bit too much. We go into these conversations, we have our MAGA hat on, we have our elephant pin on, we are Republicans out. We're just prepared. We're just a Republican. Why not just have a conversation? And I didn't even know I was conservative until I moved to D.C.
Well, how did you find out?
Because I used the term, I just felt that I was more of I was a Republican. And then I realized there's actually a difference between Republican and conservative. But also, until someone just says, "Oh, you're really conservative." And see, people don't understand there's a difference between Republican and conservative.
Well, there is. But I hear the music, which means we're out of time. And it is always such a pleasure to chat with you, and I hope we're going to do this again soon. I'm loving what you're doing. Give everybody the website for the Black Conservative Federation.
They can visit us at blackgop.us.
Blackgop.us. All right, Diante Johnson, keep it going, guy. Don't let up. You're going to make inroads, and we're looking forward to seeing what you can do there. Diante Johnson, president of the Black Conservative Federation. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back with more in a minute.
I have 2 dogs. Sometimes when we go walking, they'll get a sticker in their paw. My dachshund will stop, hold up that foot, and just look annoyed because it has slowed her down and that she needs my help to get rid of it. The terrier, on the other hand, would rather limp along like, "I'm okay, I'm just walking it off," than to stop for me to take that painful thing out of her paw. It made me think, we're like that when it comes to our relationship with God. We either have complete reliance on Him and turn to Him as soon as we have a need, or we go along suffering, trying to fix it all ourselves. I've done both. How about you? There's lots less pain and suffering when you choose to turn to Jesus right away. But maybe you've never made the decision to follow Him and don't know how to ask Him. This life is much easier to navigate when you're relying on Jesus. If you'd like to find out more, call 888-NEED-HIM or chat with us at chataboutjesus.com.
Hi, friends. There's a new show in town on Urban Family Talk, nightly, 7 p.m. Central. Join me, C.L. Bryant, as we build the bridge to conversation throughout our great nation, the greatest nation on the face of the planet, the greatest success story the world has ever known. Nightly, the C.L. Bryant Show over Urban Family Talk, 7 p.m.
Miki Addison.
My challenge to you was to evangelize your children and to disciple your children and to give them the truth. Because if you don't do that, then we have a culture that's waiting in the wings to disciple your kids and to make converts. And so I really believe and I expect the Lord to really set some people free today.
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is coming June 20th through 22nd. Learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
I'm Hank Weinblum with your word of the week. Actually, 3 words jumped out at me from congressional testimony involving Attorney General William Barr.
One, there's usually an underlying criminality.
Let's stop right there.
Yeah.
Was there an underlying crime here?
No.
Underlying, that which is the cause of something else. Also used this week about flooding in Iowa.
There's also unknown conditions of the underlying infrastructure.
Doctors use it too.
She had an underlying medical condition.
Our second word from the Attorney General about the letter he got from the special counsel.
The letter's a bit snitty.
A bipartisan word that could describe how many feel about these proceedings. And then when the Attorney General did not appear before a House committee,
a Democrat on the committee went so far as to put a chicken in the empty witness seat.
The message is that Bill Barr is a chicken.
The allegation that chickens are scaredy cats goes back to the 1600s. Dickens used it. Many people who hang out with chickens say the reputation is deserved. With your word of the week, Hank Weinblum, Fox News.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Well, first of all, Larry Kudlow coined the phrase prosperity cycle, and I think that captures what's going on. We cut taxes, we cut regulations, we encourage businesses, we particularly encourage the dramatic development of energy. We now have dramatically bigger exports. Actually, the most recent data is that the poorest 1/4 of the country is getting a bigger pay raise than our people in the upper income levels. So this is the right kind of recovery. Blue-collar workers going back to work, manufacturing growing dramatically, and I think the fact is that anybody who is serious knows that none of this had anything to do with Barack Obama. Obama's policies and the policies of the Socialist Democrats are policies of high taxes, big regulations, anti-business attitudes, and they had led us to a very, very weak economy, averaging about 1.6% growth. Trump has beaten that every single quarter since he became president, and it's getting stronger and better. And I think it's sad that the Democrats can't learn anything. You know, if you're so busy despising your opponent, whether it's in football or baseball or basketball, if you can't learn from your opponent when they beat you, you have a real hard time in the next game. And it's clear that Cory Booker is learning nothing, doesn't want to learn anything, and just goes out and repeats rhetoric that's false.
So that's Newt Gingrich, and he's making some really good points there. You can ignore it at your own peril if you're thinking about the races that are going to crack up. They're shaping up right now for 2020. Ignoring the economy, the benefit of the tax reduction package for the benefits, the businesses and private individuals. And it's not just the economy. People want to mock President Trump on a whole bunch of different stuff, but the Trump doctrine is working. His ability to rapid fire respond to these world leaders, his use of online social media, you can pan it, you can hate it, but you have to admit that there have been some significant developments. Saying that you want to kind of wrench all of that away and give the reins over to, like Pete Buttigieg just recently said, America has never really been that great. What is he talking about? He's running for president here. In an Islamic country, he'd be tossed off a rooftop. But here in America, he's running for president. Okay? America's not that great. Well, what is great then? Where would you prefer to live, old Petey Pie? And then all of the comments from numerous Democrats about the gun control, the gun confiscation. Swalwell says he would nuke Americans who wouldn't, give their guns up. In what universe would the American government and its current iteration, mostly young people from the heartland, that's who makes up the majority of our armed services members, Southern boys and girls. So rural Americans send their kids into the military. In what universe do we see those rural Americans pushing the button to send a nuke against a small town full of Americans who don't want to turn in their guns? Please, he doesn't know anything. He does not. He's out of control. Okay. He's the kind of person who talks a big game, but when it's time to put the pedal to the metal, he's nowhere to be found. And so many others. Every one of the presidential candidates on the left have made some pretty idiotic statements. And so you lay those up against President Trump coming in for a second term, and it just doesn't look that great for them. And so the chicken stunt, not good. It's not going to get them anywhere. So before we get to Biden's Ukraine problem, I want to talk a little bit about this. This story, it kind of developed over the weekend. You have Abby Johnson, the real life heroine of the movie Unplanned and the book. And remember, she used to work at an abortion clinic, and she rose up to the level of director. She ran the whole clinic, and she was a rising star within Planned Parenthood organization. And then she came to the light. One day she's in the room. She got called in to work the ultrasound machine during an abortion and realized what she'd been taking part in and left it. And they only had one child at the time. Now I think she's pregnant with their 8th child, and she's just doing great things for God. Her testimony is strong, and she's helped 480 plus people come out as she did of the abortion industry. So it's interesting because you got this guy, Brian Sims, Pennsylvania. He's an elected official, and one of his specialties, besides advocating for same-sex marriage, is attacking young women and girls and elderly women when they're praying outside of Planned Parenthoods. He likes to videotape himself doing it and then offer people who are standing nearby $100 to give him their names and telephone numbers and home addresses so that he can, quote unquote, dox them, which is taking someone's personal private information like their address and putting it online so any wackadoo who's down there can go kill them or whatever. So this last time, I guess, he put the tape up online, and he really made a huge mistake doing that. Now, Matt Walsh has actually tweeted about the story, and he says they're going to have a rally at 11 a.m. on Friday at the Planned Parenthood at 1144 Locust Street in Philly. And a bunch of different pro-life groups reached out to him minutes after he sent the original tweet to bring this together. They're inviting Brian Sims, Pennsylvania, at Brian Sims, PA, to come with his camera and participate. He can be counter protest or what have you. And this is interesting because, this guy has this rabid hatred for Christians. And Abby Johnson is now saying she's coming to the rescue of these Pennsylvanian women they just pray outside the clinic. They don't protest. They just go out and pray, which in my experience outside the Planned Parenthood here in St. Louis, that is pretty much what's done there. I've given some pretty fiery speeches there before, but not as often as I've just been there to pray with other people. That's usually what's going on outside, nothing else, just praying. So Abby Johnson has tweeted out, "Let me clarify. I will be at the same Planned Parenthood at 11 a.m. this Friday, May 10th, so be sure to reschedule your mani-pedi so you can make it. Wanted to give you plenty of time to coordinate your schedule." Abby Johnson tweets, "Just booked my ticket to Philly, Brian Sims, PA. I will be at the clinic around 11 a.m. See you there." She says, "I can be there at Friday at 10 a.m. Bring your camera. Let me know." So they're fighting this guy. And she has been tweeting him all afternoon. She started off with, "How about I let you know next time I'm standing on the sidewalk advocating for life? Let's see how powerful you are with your little camera and shaky voice when you encounter a young, empowered pro-life woman who won't back down from the bullies. Bring it, coward." Wow. So that's pretty fascinating. So we'll keep an eye on that. She actually just this Saturday, just to kind of wrap it all up, this past Saturday, Abby Johnson had her ultrasound of her unborn baby on the Jumbotron in Times Square. And apparently the entire area fell silent while her baby was projected onto the screen. And they saw the first images via ultrasound of her unborn child. And it was a pretty amazing thing that happened. So, she's out there. She's still doing it. It's really great to see her making waves for the pro-life movement and taking on the bullies. That's what we need. We need people who are Holy Spirit empowered, courageous, and on the ball, unwilling to flinch or fall back. Admittedly, she's been through the fire, and that gives you a lot of courage when you go through that. But we all have that in us. That's the Holy Spirit that's operating within us. Not our own might, but the power of the Holy Spirit. So we can all do these things. We can all say these things. So the Bidens and their Ukraine problem. And I was talking about this a little bit before, and now here we are. We're ready. This is something that's going to continue to crop up as a story. Of course, there is no Democrat media that's going to want to cover it really in a huge way. There may be some stories, but I found this over at the Daily Caller. The highlights of this piece are basically Hunter Biden, the son of Joe Biden, was appointed to the board of directors of a Ukrainian company as a part of an effort to recruit well-connected Americans while the company was under investigation. And this is according to the New York Times. Then Vice President Joe Biden played a role in pressuring Ukraine to oust the country's top prosecutor, Viktor Shokin, who was investigating the company named Burisma. So Shokin's successor initially ended the investigation into Burisma, but then decided in March of 2019 to reopen it. So Joe Biden was actually, he's the dad of this guy, Hunter. Hunter was on the board of this company, Burisma. Now, at the time, Joe Biden, he was feeling his oats. He's like, look at me, I'm big and bad. I can make people do stuff. He actually took credit for pressuring the Ukraine into removing this top prosecutor who was leading the probes. Then, this is recent, the Ukraine relaunched an investigation into the company, and President Donald Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, has repeatedly called for the U.S. Department of Justice to scrutinize the Bidens. You see how this is working out? So Hunter Biden was on this 4-member board of Burisma Holdings, and it's just happens to be the Ukraine's largest privately owned gas company. And this is back in April of 2014. The seat came while Joe Biden was serving in President Obama's administration and was slated to head relations with the Ukraine for the Obama administration. So you see how this is a conflict of interest? Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, should have said, my father is the vice president of the United States, and the Ukraine has international business dealings with the country for which my dad serves as in the administration. I'm probably not the best person for you to have on your board. May look fun, but it's not going to be good ethically for me and my family. It will look as if there's undue access, undue influence. It's just messy. But notice, this is never a problem when it's a Democrat. But if a Republican even sniffs at, like, everybody's mad on the left that Donald Trump at one point tried to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. Why wouldn't he have? He was a civilian back then. What would preclude him from building Trump Towers in every major city on earth? I don't have an opinion on it. I've never been in Trump Tower. I hear it's nice, but whatever. But what would stop a business person from wanting to do that kind of business, especially since he didn't know for sure he was going to be the president? So Burisma is actually a natural gas exploration and production company owned by Mykola Slukevsky, a cabinet member of former Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych. Yanukovych was removed from his position in February of 2014. He currently lives in exile in Russia and is wanted by Ukraine for high treason. Slukevsky later fled the country in late 2014 as Ukrainian prosecutors launched investigations into his time in public office, as well as his private businesses. Around the same time, the UK Serious Fraud Office froze $23 million in a London account that was linked to Slukevsky. A British court later unblocked the bank accounts in January of 2015, finding no grounds for further consideration of the case. So, there's investigations, freezing of funds, then funds were let go, yada, yada, yada. So roughly 2 years after Hunter Biden is appointed to Burisma's board, the vice president traveled to Kiev, Ukraine's capital, and he threatened that the U.S. would withhold $1 billion in loan guarantees unless Ukraine ousted its prosecutor general, Victor Shokin. At the time, Shokin was accused of ignoring corruption within his own political office, but Shokin was also investigating corruption within Burisma, the same company that Hunter Biden was on. So you tell me how it's obstruction of justice when President Trump tweets a few times and says in private meetings with his staff that he wishes that the investigation was over because he's innocent. That's obstruction. But Joe Biden, traveling as the vice president of the United States, goes and threatens another country that if they don't stop an investigation into a company that his son is on the board of, that they won't get loan guarantees that they need to do, whatever they're doing. And that's what? What would that be? Sounds like some kind of corruption to me. So several investigations into Burisma, which included possible tax evasion, money laundering, all that stuff, preceded Shokin's time as prosecutor general. But he also launched a separate investigation into gas licenses that Slukevsky issued while serving in his official capacity at the Ministry of Ecology and Natural Resources. So there's more to this. I'll throw the link up. Oh, one more thing. Hunter Biden, who did not previously have any experience in the Eastern European country, was paid up to $50,000 a month for his work with Burisma, according to financial disclosures. Yes, you're probably driving along or you're sipping your coffee at your desk and you're thinking, did she say a month? Yes, I did. $50,000 a month, not a year, a month. Only months before he accepted the position as a board member, the Navy Reserve had discharged Hunter Biden for failing a drug test. It tested positive for cocaine. Yeah, corruption. It's not Donald Trump. The Democrats get some. Get you some corruption, y'all. Love corruption. Get you someone who loves you the way Democrats love corruption. How about that? All right. God bless. Have a fantastic evening. Back with you tomorrow. StacyOnTheRight.com.